What if the very thing you've been told makes you a good woman is actually what's making you a target? Because for most of my life, I didn't even consider that I might be a people pleaser. I saw myself as easygoing, low maintenance, the kind of person who just wanted peace in my relationships. And I genuinely thought I was doing it right. But what I didn't realize at the time was that the very way I was showing up in relationships was quietly opening the door to the wrong kind of people in my life. So, in this video, I'm going to show you the trait that toxic people look for. We're going to talk about how it actually shows up in real life, why it feels like the right thing to do, and the moment I realized it was actually hurting me. And by the end, you'll be able to clearly see whether this pattern is showing up in your life and what may need to change. I never would have described myself as a people pleaser. That wasn't even language I used. I just thought I was easygoing. I was the person who didn't need a lot, didn't ask for much, didn't want to make things difficult for anyone. And if I'm being honest, I actually took pride in that. I thought that made me a good woman, a good partner, a good Christian, because I had been taught directly and indirectly that being loving meant putting other people first, that being kind meant being accommodating, and that keeping the peace was always the right thing to do. And this didn't just show up in relationships, this was everywhere with my kids, with my family, with people in my life in general. Saying yes just came naturally to me, but saying no, even a weak no, felt very uncomfortable for me. And not just uncomfortable, it made me feel guilty. I remember one time a youth leader, they told me that my daughter had said, "My mom is the most selfless person I know." And at the time, I was so touched by that. I thought that's exactly who I want to be. But looking back now, I see that a little differently because what I thought was selflessness was actually me constantly putting myself last. And I didn't even realize I was doing it. The reason this is so hard to see for a lot of people is because it feels right, especially if you grew up in church. You're taught things like be kind, forgive, keep the peace, have a gentle spirit, and none of those things are wrong. But when those ideas are taken out of context, they can turn into something they were never meant to be. Because kindness doesn't mean you disappear, and keeping the peace isn't the same thing as avoiding conflict. I didn't know that. I thought if I was just loving enough, patient enough, understanding enough, everything would work itself out. But what I didn't understand at that time is that you can be doing something that looks right on the outside and it can still be hurting you on the inside. And once that started to click for me, that's when everything started to change in my thinking. I remember hearing a teaching about the difference between being nice and being kind. And at first, I didn't really receive it because in my mind, those two things were pretty much the same. But the more I sat with it, the more uncomfortable it started to make me because I started to see myself in it. See, the teaching explained that being nice often was simply being manipulative. I was being nice to manipulate the response from the other person. So if I did not want any angry response from the other person, I would do whatever nice thing to keep that person from being angry, even if that nice thing would expend any energy I had left or take the last of the money I had left or cause me to move my schedule all around and put me behind on the things I needed to get done. So you see, my being nice wasn't always about love. It was about me deciding to manufacture the response from the other person. It was self serving, but also self abandoning. And most of the time, it was just about managing how other people felt, avoiding conflict, keeping people happy, trying to control the outcome of the interaction. And that was hard for me to admit and accept because that meant I had to admit to myself that I wasn't just being kind, I was manipulative and people pleasing. And once I saw that, I couldn't unsee it. I started to recognize the patterns, the over explaining, the guilt when I tried to set even the smallest boundary, the constant desire to make sure everyone else was okay, even when I wasn't. And I had to be honest with myself. If I really wanted to heal, I couldn't keep calling this something it wasn't. I had to call it what it was. If this is hitting home with you, will you do me a favor? Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone you think it could help. So I know this is something that is helping people and you would like more teaching on. Because what I realized is what I hope all women get to realize. It explains so much about my relationships. When you operate as a people pleaser, you struggle to say no. You don't want to disappoint people. You avoid conflict. You overgive. You over explain. And what that does is it removes resilience and it removes resistance. It's like having the door to your life wide open, no lock, no filter, no boundaries around who gets access to you. And here's what I didn't understand before. There are people who can actually sense that immediately. Toxic people, they don't look for strong personalities to control. They look for kind people without boundaries, people who won't push back, people who will tolerate more than they should, people who will keep giving even when it's not being reciprocated. And when I look back now, I can see it so clearly. I thought I was doing everything right, but I was actually setting myself up. I didn't just encounter toxic people, I attracted them. So let me ask you a few questions. Do you struggle to say no, even when you want to? Do you feel guilty when you try to set limits? Do you find yourself over explaining your decisions so people will understand and not be upset? Do you prioritize keeping the peace even when something doesn't sit right with you? If that's you, I want you to hear me clearly. There's nothing wrong with you. This isn't a character flaw, but it is a pattern. And it's a pattern that many of us were taught. Because just because you learn something doesn't mean you have to keep living it. Because awareness is the first step. But awareness by itself isn't enough, which brings us to what actually needs to change. The thing I was missing, the thing many women are missing, is boundaries. Not walls, not shutting people out, but clarity, self respect, wisdom in how we allow people to show up in our life. Boundaries aren't about controlling other people, they're about deciding what you will and won't allow. They're the difference between having your door wide open and having a gate where there's access to that gate, guided by wisdom. And most of us were never taught how to do this, especially in a way that lines up with our faith. But before we can even start setting boundaries, we need to be able to clearly recognize the kind of people this pattern attracts. And once you see this pattern, you realize this isn't random. There's a reason the same types of relationships keep showing up in your life. Here's the problem. If you don't recognize what you're dealing with, you'll keep getting pulled into the same cycle. So, in the next video in this series, I'm going to walk you through 7 signs that you're dealing with a narcissistic personality or a toxic personality. Because a lot of women don't realize what they're actually facing until they're already deep in it. And once you can recognize it, you can start to respond differently. So I want you to take good care of yourselves. I want you to get outside. I just felt like I needed to be outside today. Sunshine is so healing. And most of all, I want you to remember that you're not called to be consumed by toxic people. You're not called to be consumed by the worries that everyone else is carrying. You are really called to be renewed. So keep that in your heart. Think about what that really means for you. And I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Bye, y'all.